Please welcome Ron Brightstein. And as you see, Ron already knows he's got a glass of wine in his hand and no ties here. We're casual tonight, okay? Casual. So we figured if we're going to put together some of the greatest wines we found with our friends from the Seeker Wines and Jewel Osco, who do we ask but our friends at Smoke Daddy? So please welcome Chef Matt and Chef Danny. Woo! How's it going? Excellent. So we figured if we're going to put together some great food and some wine, we have to talk about the more important things first. You're all excited that the Cubs clinched last night, right? I mean, that's what you were watching in the back of the kitchen, right?
Oh,
Cubs!
Yeah.
And for me, you know, the Cubs clinched last night, and then for anyone who is watching on Facebook Live right now or at culinarykitchenchicago.com, we have our audience here, our live audience as well. You can hashtag Chicago Kitchen at any time. This is the greatest pregame ever because the Bears and the Packers are on tonight as well. So when I think of like a food and like pre-gaming and wine together, and with the Bears being on 780 and 105.9, we couldn't figure for a more perfect night for you guys to be here. So we're thrilled.
Right.
It's great, yeah. Wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So the first question I have for Chef Matt is when you are heading into the back of the house in the kitchen, what's your number one inspiration? What are you thinking of when you're saying, I'm going to create a dish tonight?
Man, well, you know, I mean, for me, food and cooking and all that goes way back to, you know, when I was growing up and stuff like that. And the reason I got into being a chef was because, you know, I grew up around the table with my grandma and grandpa, my parents, my family. We got a nice, close-knit family. And so I've always wanted to just kind of bring that feeling that I had when I was a kid out to everybody else, you know what I mean? And give somebody a chance to go out and celebrate and kind of just, you know, converse over and things like that, like we used to do when I was growing up. And so you know, we have so many different restaurants in our group. We got 11 different restaurants. Smoke Daddy's just one of them. But certainly when it comes to Smoke Daddy, it's about that, you know, that warm feeling you get when you get that smoked meat or, you know, like enjoying the game or something like that. So everything we do there, we're trying to just heighten that experience.
And for you, Ron, with the Seeker Wines, you have so many varietals. And for myself and for the audience, we just like tasting good wine. But for you, it's much more of an experience. What are you looking for when maybe you're visiting the vines? And what are you looking for in the taste of a grape for what you think your customers will love?
Well, we always try to look to find the highest quality fruit we can find, number one. That's kind of, if the fruit isn't good, you're not going to get good wine. You can be the most talented winemaker. If you don't have good fruit, it's going to just be okay wine. So that's number one. So with the Seeker, what we've done is we've actually gone all over the world to source the fruit and have it produced in the countries and the places where it's made the best.
Okay.
So the wine that everybody enjoyed when they walked in, the Sauvignon Blanc, comes from New Zealand. The first one we're going to have tonight is from Germany, and we have wine from Argentina and California and France and Italy, et cetera, throughout the whole line. So we've gone to try to get the best wines produced that we can to bring everybody a great value and a great wine.
Do you guys hear that? We're having wine from Argentina tonight and from all these amazing places. Who's excited? Come on. So just want to let our audience know online as well, thesmokedaddy.com is the website. You guys are on Division here, downtown in the Loop. And then for all the wines we're looking at for today, theseekerwines.com for the website. So Ron gave us some wines that we were going to taste. And the first one we're going to do tonight is the Riesling 2015. And you want to tell us a little bit about this before we ask Chef Matt about what meal he decided to pair with this?
Sure. This wine is a wine that I love, Riesling, and this wine comes from the Mosel region in Germany. And one of the things I always loved German wine, I grew up, my family had a fine wine shop in Southern California, and I grew up and I learned to drink wine drinking Riesling. So this is kind of very appropriate.
When you were 21 and older.
Yes, exactly,
okay.
exactly.
Exactly, sure.
Yes.
Okay, family business.
So one of the things I love about Riesling is the lightness of it, the crispness of it, but there's always, this wine has just a hint of sweetness to it. And that's one of the things that I always like. I like the hint of sweetness. I don't like overly cloyingly sweet, but this wine just really has it really nicely. And
not too overpowering.
Exactly, exactly. And one of the things tonight that I'd like you guys to do is, a lot of times I see people, they'll go and they'll taste their wine, or they'll sit down and they'll eat their food and then they'll just drink the wine and they don't look at the nuances. So I kind of am into the experience of the nuances of the wine. So you have the Riesling in front of you. So what I always like to do is have everybody smell the wine first. And I know this is like wine tasting 101, so if you've done this before...
No, you should tell us, because I'm sure there's a member in the audience who has never done a real wine tasting. It is an art to it. So why don't you explain what we should be doing?
Okay, so a lot of times you want to swirl the wine a little bit if you can. And what that does is that helps release the aromas so that you can smell more of what's going on in the glass. So this has a lot of different aromas in it.
If you're watching online right now, you notice that Ron is the only one who has a glass of wine.
How did that happen?
But Danny and Matt and I, nothing, okay? Just remember that,
know
okay,
nothing
good.
about chefs. We always have to
I was
do
going to say.
How did I let that happen?
Not to interrupt you, but that's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'll get you wine, okay? So what are some of you smelling this? I'd love to hear what some of the... I mean, I'm smelling all this food here right in front of me that's cooking, but I'd be curious. I mean, I know what this should smell like, but I'm curious what you guys think. What did you get out of it?
Peaches.
I got peaches, yeah. Honey, very good. Pineapple.
Wow. Again,
This
Ron
is all out
the
of a
only
grape.
one
This
with
is
a
all
glass
out of a
up
grape.
here.
Okay, here.
Thank you. I want to smell it. Thank you. Danny, take a sniff. Exactly.
You're going to need another glass.
Okay, we'll need another glass. We'll just be community here and share this.
There we go.
So then what I like to always do is I like to taste the wine. And I just take small sips of the wine. And this wine is just in the mouth, it's got like a kind of a creaminess to it a little bit. It's not a buttery creaminess, but it's just that kind of works with the honey character that we got in it. And it just has this really nice, easy to drink flavor, at least for me.
That's very smooth.
So don't drink all of the wine in your glass though right now, because one of the things that I really think is important is when you drink the wine, it tastes different by itself than it does when you have it with the food. And so please make sure you save enough so that when, after Matt demonstrates the dish he's going to do, and then they bring it out and you get to try it, then try the wine again after you taste the food and make mental notes on how it tasted before and how it tasted after, because it should taste dramatically different afterwards. That's usually what happens, and that's how we kind of do wine and food pairing, is by seeing what happens to the wine after you've tasted the food, and that's really where you figure out if it goes together or not.
All right, so we've all had our first sip. Now, do you guys want to hear the meal that Chef Matt has paired it with? Oh my gosh. All right. So our very first meal, and what happened was Ron gave these wines to Matt and said, you create and pair how you like. So our very first meal that Matt's going to intro for us, and they've already been preparing it, is smoked pork belly with jalapeno cornbread, OMG, hashtag, and peach barbecue. Matt.
That's right.
Tell us. That's right.
Okay, so this is kind of an interesting thing because you don't typically necessarily think of barbecue and wine going together. You know, it's typically more of like, you know, the beer or something like that. But there's, you know, the wines that we tried really actually paired very well with this. And so what we're doing tonight, like, I didn't necessarily pull dishes straight from our menu at the Smoke Daddy, but I wanted to take some of that inspiration and the feel of barbecue for this. So as he said, we're going to be doing a smoked pork belly, we're going to do a peach barbecue sauce, and then actually one thing I forgot to mention, we're also going to do a little bit of sweet and spicy pork rinds to go with this as well, okay, along with the jalapeno cornbread. So what I wanted to show you now, you know, this is kind of tough when you're talking about doing a demonstration of barbecue. It's kind of tough to demo the actual barbecue, right, because it takes hours upon hours to cook. And as a matter of fact, the pork belly that we did, we smoked for 4 hours. And then after that, we cooked it for another 4 hours in this neat little contraption here, which I'll tell you about in a second. But this is called sous vide cooking. And it's a way that you can control low and slow temperatures to get great textures out of it. But so for the demonstration, what I want to show you was how we made the peach barbecue sauce for this one, okay? So barbecue, the style of barbecue that we do is the tomato-based barbecue. And so, you know, some people might kind of scoff at this a little bit, but actually I like to use ketchup as the base for it, okay? And the reason we use ketchup, like, you obviously can use fresh tomatoes and things like that, but if you think of the characteristics of barbecue sauce, you got the tomato base, but then you've got the tangy, you've got sweet, and that's already in the ketchup. So all we're really going to do is we're just going to build on the base of that, okay? So what I'm going to start off with, I've got my pan here just on about medium heat or so. And we're going to start off with just a little bit of oil, just some very neutral oil. This is just vegetable oil. And then we're going to start by sauteing some onions and garlic.
So when you're in the back of the house and you're starting to put together a recipe and barbecue, what type of music do you have playing?
Oh, man.
Because we are Chicago's hottest country, so it doesn't have to be Luke Bryan, it doesn't have to be Florida Georgia Line, Shania Twain. We love all types of music, but we're curious because for me and for so many people, music is the fabric of our life. And
Sure.
so for you, where you're being so creative with your flavors and the food, how does music influence that?
So that's a really interesting question because it really depends on the mood. You know, and sometimes it also has to do with like what kind of food are we cooking. If I'm doing barbecue, I might have some country on. I might have. I know, right? I might also
Southern barbecue. Hello.
I might also have something a little bit harder, maybe a little bit of rock or something like
absolutely.
that. But when I'm cooking at home or when I'm cooking a little bit more, finer dining or something, I love jazz.
Yes.
I love doing jazz. I used to work for a chef named Charlie Trotter. Way back.
Never heard of him before.
Never heard of him.
Especially in Chicago.
And I didn't work for him for very long, but I did work in his kitchens. And one of the things that I loved was how he would equate the act of cooking to that of playing jazz. Because we, in our restaurants, we do things, by the recipe and because we want it to be consistent and stuff. But when you're just kind of at the, we kind of call it at the bench right here, at the bench, and you're just riffing. You can do all sorts of stuff, and it's just like playing jazz. It's never the same twice if you don't want it to be anyway. So
these are fresh cut peaches that you just put in?
So these are actually roasted peaches.
Oh,
so
wow.
We're obviously right at the tail end of peach season, if not completely out of it. But one of the reasons why I like this is because we actually want them to be a little bit sweeter.
Okay.
And the more ripe that they are, a little bit more sugars are developed.
Yeah, we go to our farmer's market every Saturday, and for the last 3 Saturdays, our farmer has been saying it's the last week for peaches, and then every week he has a little bit more, and he said because of the warmer temperatures, he has more, and they're being a little more sweet.
It's been really crazy just across the board with vegetables this year, and just the growing seasons for everything. It's just been so... it's a very different year because of all the hot weather out in the, or the dry weather and then the wet weather and all that out on the West Coast in particular. But, okay, so in building on this, so now we're going to speed this up a little bit. One of the hallmarks of barbecue, not only the smoking of the meats, but also the sauce, is that it takes a long time. But I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Don't worry, I already have the magic of television. I have one right here all ready to go. But...
What? Magic of television? What?
But so to this, we would let this cook down a little bit more. We'd want these peaches to start breaking apart. You also could take, like I'm doing this as if we were doing in the restaurant where we want to build those flavors and things like that, and we like to do things from scratch. But let's say if you were doing this at home, what you could do is you could take peaches, roast them, puree them, and then just add them to a barbecue sauce that you like. And your ratios might be a little bit surprising. You want to have a lot of peach. The amount of barbecue is such a powerful flavor, but you can do that as well. But so to this, we'll add in our ketchup. Stir that. I'm going to turn this up a little bit.
Since we are not watching this demonstration on Wonkavision tonight, I want to let you know that it smells amazing. And our audience here is going to be tasting all of the dishes tonight, which we're very excited about. So for the folks who are watching on Facebook Live and also on culinarykitchenchicago.com, or if you're on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag Chicago Kitchen, these are all menu items that can be enjoyed at the Smoke Daddy.
Most of them are, yeah. We have one of them in here that's a little bit out of left field, just because I wanted to kind of change it up for the wine that we tried, and we'll get to it. But it kind of inspired me to go this different route. But yeah, so we would let this cook down, and then to that we're going to add a little bit of chili powder. We're going to do a little smoked paprika. We're going to do a little bit of mustard as well. And now for this one, a lot of people, I think they like to use the just yellow mustard because it's much more, it's a little bit higher in acid. But I think that we get enough of the acid from the tomato in here with the ketchup. So I stay away from that. Plus then, we're also going to add a little apple cider vinegar. And then a little bit of brown sugar. I'm running out of room on my board. And then a little bit of molasses. Now, I'm using light molasses here. You can also use darker molasses or blackstrap molasses. It just kind of depends on how deep you want the flavors to be. But anyway, so like I said, typically you would let this go for a few hours. Well, I didn't say a few hours, but you'd let it go for a while, and I like to do it for a few hours. And as it starts to reduce down, which it will over time, you can just add a little bit of, you can add stock to it, you could add just a little bit of water to it, you could add some bourbon to it, something like that. But after a while, it'll just start to break itself down. And then if you really like, and I personally like to have kind of a little bit of chunk to my barbecue sauce personally, but if you like to have a real smooth one, you just throw it in the blender and you're good to go there. Okay? So we're going to let that go for a little bit. Give me a second to
How often do you put
space.
apple cider vinegar in your recipes? Because my total random tangent, because we're just having a conversation, my chiropractor has said that every person in the world should do a shot of that every day for health benefits, and I thought he was crazy.
Yeah, we do actually use it quite a bit. We build dressings off of it. We do marinades off of it. We use it quite a bit. I'm interested by that health benefit aspect of it, because I think
it's phenomenal. He's done a bunch of studies on it. I just thought he was crazy.
Well, he might be, but
okay.
Anyway, so we're gonna let that go, and then here, this is kind of how ours came out, or not kind of, that's exactly how it came out. A little bit lighter in color than you would expect, but it's got a great solid peach flavor to it. Of this, probably about half of this volume is peaches in this one, so it'll really come through. The next thing that we're going to do for this, or that I wanted to talk about anyway, how you doing, Danny? Doing good? All right. It's Danny. Danny's the sous chef, not actually at the Smoke Daddy, but he's sous chef at one of our other restaurants, Remington's, which is right down the street, and he was nice enough to come over and help me out. But, okay, so what do I want to move on to next? So why don't we talk about this little setup here, okay? So have you guys heard of sous vide cooking before? Immersion circulator, all that sort of stuff? Okay. Well, so I didn't get a unanimous yes there, so I'll go ahead and explain it. But this is a technique that was pioneered by, well, it was really championed by Thomas Keller of the French Laundry out in California. And originally he did it to cook foie gras. Because with foie gras, are you guys familiar with that? So with that, you want to be able to cook it and render out some of the fat, but you don't want to just melt it away because it's like 95% fat. So he was trying to figure out a way that you could get this precise temperature without losing all of it. So what he found was that by doing sous vide, you can control it to a very precise temperature. And what it is, it's basically just a water bath and then one of these units, which is called an immersion circulator. And these used to be, in the realm of only fine dining restaurants, science labs, things like that. But now you can actually buy these. I think Amazon will sell them. I think you can find them all over the place, really. And they only cost about, I think this one was $150 or something like that. But this is, the reason you would use this is when you want to do something low and slow and you want to really control the temperature on it. It's great for doing things like braises or pork belly. Great doing steaks in it. You can sear a steak. Then you can throw it in here. So you get the crust, you throw it in here, and you set it to exactly 130 degrees. So you get that perfect medium rare all the way through. Then you take it out of the bag, throw it back on the grill real fast, get it hot again, and then serve it. And it's awesome. So for this one, we use it to basically mimic a longer cook time or like a braise. So I'm going to try to take this out without losing it here. But we have our pork belly that we did. And again, I smoked this for about 4 hours. And the reason that we only did it for the 4 hours is because, even though it takes longer to cook than that, the meat doesn't really take up any more flavor from the smoke after 4 hours. So, you know, the only reason that you continue to do that is if you're trying to build up the bark on the meat or something like that dark crust on it. And in this case, I didn't necessarily want to do that. I just wanted to have it nice and tender and all. So, got that all braced up. So what I'm going to do, oh, you know what? I forgot about my, here we go. Okay, my cornbread.
Who forgets about the cornbread when
know,
there's
right?
jalapeno in it?
So I guess I'm at
You know
that.
why? It's because I forced Chef Matt to have that little taste.
Yeah, that's what it was.
wine.
So I guess I'm at the
Before.
point now where I actually can start plating up. So, all right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, just because I like to make it look a little pretty, I'm going to take some of that barbecue sauce. I'm going to do just a quick drag across a little bit. All right.
See, this
so
is
then,
where food is art.
yes,
We love watching this.
That's what we're going for. That just shocked me for a second. Okay, so then our cornbread. I might as well explain how we do our cornbread too. So, if you're looking to cut your calories, stay away from this cornbread. This recipe has about 2 pounds of butter in it, and it yields basically 2 sheet trays. So for one of these sheet trays,
Why was there a groan in the crowd? You should be like, yes, give out the butter, right?
But it makes it so sweet and so delicious and creamy and just, oh, it's awesome. And then adding in the pickled jalapenos is going to lend just a little bit of heat. And that's one of the reasons why, for pairing with this wine, I wanted to do the jalapeno, because this wine goes well with just a little bit of spice too. So, so get this nice and warm and set it down right there on the plate. And then I'm going to cut our pork belly just into a couple of pieces here. And then we're gonna, how you doing, Danny? I'm always gonna check in on Danny. All right, so where did I put that? All right. So I'm gonna lay this out here because what I'm gonna do, I'm going to top it with our barbecue sauce. And you'll see why I'm doing this on a different tray here in a second. Maybe you figured out by the yellow tool next to me what's coming next.
This is something we should not be replicating at home. Is that what you're saying?
Well, maybe in your garage.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so one of the things with barbecue that I see people do a lot, that at home, which, you know, at home do it as you please, but one thing that we try to do at the restaurant, we never want to serve, we call it raw barbecue sauce, okay? We never want to take our, you know, say a slab of ribs, bring it out of the smoker, throw on some sauce, and then just send it out, okay? Because one of the things you want to do is you want to caramelize that sauce. You want to, like, reduce down the flavors a little bit more, coat it so you got kind of a nice sheen on it and stuff. So we're going to do the same thing here. Okay, so normally in a restaurant setting, we would do it under a broiler. Well, here, I'm going to do it under an open flame. And you don't want to do it so long that it's burning. All I'm looking to do is just getting it to start bubble a little bit. We're sharing. All right.
On top of the cornbread?
On top of the cornbread.
Wow.
All right. Okay, so then the next thing that we're going to do for this one, you guys can hear me over the torch? Okay? Yes. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to do with this is the pork rinds. So you guys know what pork rinds are and all? So in doing, one of the great, awesome byproducts of doing pork belly like this is that you end up with the pork skin, okay, from the belly. So that's actually how we made these pork rinds or chicharrones. So what we do is we take the skin and we clean it off, get all the fat, all the meat off of it, and then we boil it for about 2 hours until it gets really nice and soft and supple, okay? We're going to scrape down the last little bit of it just to make sure we get no fat on it, because if you have fat, it won't do what it's supposed to do here. And then you actually dehydrate it. And what you're doing is you're actually creating what scientifically is actually a glass, just like the glass in your window panes and things like that. It's liquid, that you have water suspended inside of this solid state. When you drop it down into a fryer and something at high heat, that water turns to steam eventually, and when it does, it puffs it all up, okay? So I've got a fryer here at 375 degrees. What's up, Danny?
Danny's like, don't talk to me. I got a blowtorch in my hand. Concentrating.
So I don't know if we can see it up on the screen or not on the camera, but basically you drop these down, they sit down for a second, and then after about 6 or 7 seconds, they start to expand and puff up. And it's really important when you're doing this that you get the
Oh, there we go. We can see it on the camera now.
Can you see it? Awesome.
Wow.
Okay.
Those puffed up
So
quickly.
you can see they went from this size to that size. Okay? And they're doing that just because they have water trapped in them, and then as it gets hot enough, it will start to boil and expand. All right. So we'll take those up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to season these really fast with a smoked paprika, a little salt, and a little sugar. Just like that. So good old barbecue, just presented maybe a little bit different. And then finish it off just with a little bit of chive.
So is there
top.
anything in this recipe or this plate that you would maybe only make on a special occasion, or where you said you wanted to be a little more pizzazz than a regular menu, where you said, I'm going to add an extra flavor or an extra texture in that you wouldn't normally do?
That I didn't hear. So I always try to add in, I learned from a chef a long time ago that you always want to incorporate all the flavors and all the textures.
Okay.
So you want to have something smooth, something crisp, something, something light, something dense, like all those sort of things. The same way that you would want to have, sweet, salty, bitter, savory, all throughout. Doing it right there, Danny? I'll help you out here in a second. But yeah, so that's our first dish here. It's definitely a little bit more elevated in terms of barbecue, but delicious nonetheless. So
look at that beauty. Gorgeous.
I'm going to jump in and help Danny with these last couple.
Yes. So while they are plating that and distributing that for everyone, is it okay if we start talking about our second wine?
Well, we have to have the first one first.
Oh, that's right. We still have to taste the first one. Okay.
So if you should, I see most everybody still has wine. So, now that the food's there, take a quick sip of this. Get that palate ready for it. Get the little, the wine dancing on your palate a little bit there, and then, take a bite and see what you think, and then take another sip of the wine.
While we're doing this, is there a wine in your brand, the Seeker Wines, that it surprised you the most when you first tasted it? Or you might be a white summer, because the stereotypical for a lot of people who don't drink wine is whites in the summer, reds in the winter. For reds are darker, colder temperature, white summery. Is there a varietal that really surprised you and said, I had no idea because I really like whites and then I really love this red grape that we discovered? Is there anything like that?
Well, I've always been a big fan of Pinot Noir, mainly because you can drink it in almost any weather.
Yes.
And you can drink it with lots of different kinds of foods. And one of the things that's kind of cool about Pinot Noir is that depending on how you prepare the food, is whether, how it will go with it. So sometimes you can use, even as we're doing something that you would think you'd have red wine with here tonight with this Riesling, so you can even do something like pork, like even a pork chop or something like that. If you put it on the barbecue, you can have that Pinot Noir with it, and it'll go really nicely because there'll be a little bit of spice and smokiness in it. And that's one of the things I like. It's a very versatile food wine for me, and that's kind of how I like to pick wines to drink.
And with the changing of the seasons, at least for me, we got into fall. I look forward to that because I want to drink more of the reds, like you're saying, the Pinot Noir or the Cab or the Malbec, where you it's a little bit of a more full wine, but it's okay because the temperature is changing.
Temperature changes, you can certainly drink big red wines during the summer if you have the food prepared right. If you put anything on the barbecue, you eat any of Matt's food during the summer, you can have any kind of big, bold red wine with most anything. During the winter, you can have all sorts of different kinds of foods with these big red wines because you want to drink wines that are warmer because a lot of the red wines have higher alcohol levels, so that kind of warms your body up a little bit more. So that's why a lot of people like the white wines a lot. Most of them have a little bit lower alcohol levels and are a little bit easier to drink during the summertime.
So what do you guys think with the Riesling paired with the jalapeno cornbread, the peach barbecue?
Does it taste different? How does it go? I haven't
Does the wine taste different
yet,
now that you've had it with the meal together? One of the other things with this Riesling is if you go find it at Jewel Osco, you pick up a bottle, it pairs really well with spicy Asian.
Yes,
and I love spicy Asian food, so if you're a fan of that, you can pair it well together with that.
And that's one of the reasons is when the wine has a little bit of sugar in it, it'll help counteract the spiciness in the food. So it works really, really well with it. We got to try this, Drew.
Please do.
You sure?
Did everybody out there
bite?
get some so we can...
I'll do a bite. It looks wonderful.
Well, we have to get a bite.
I don't think I've ever had a pork rind before.
Oh, I have.
You've never had a pork
rind?
Never. Never.
Oh, boy.
I know.
I'm
Matt
glad
and I were talking
I'm
before
here.
about... Well, I know. We were talking before. I was more being like jalapeno cornbread. I'm going to eat it all, and there's going to be none left for everybody else. Yeah, we already have some finished plates. I like that.
Here.
Make sure you're
bigger
taking
portions.
Well, here. You
That's
have to
right.
try your pork rind here.
Thank you. Looks amazing. Is everyone else noticing how soft the pork belly meat is?
Yeah, and there's, we obviously at the restaurant, we have a big, room-sized smoker that we use, and that thing's just churning nonstop day after day, 24 hours a day. But it doesn't mean that you guys can't smoke at home. There's a lot of, electric smokers that you can get for outdoor use. You can get some gas smokers as well. One of the things that I really like to do is just use my charcoal grill. And you can get some lump charcoal, hickory, mesquite, apple, cherry, all these different woods, and you can actually smoke right there at home on a kettle grill or something like that. You don't necessarily have to have one of the big guys that we have. So
now that I got to try this, so I the spiciness from the jalapeno and from what's in the sauce really helped. The sweetness in this kind of really helped counteract it, and it really kind of totally changed the whole equation for me on this. Did it do that for you guys? Were you surprised? Did you think, well, how's this going to work? So
Everyone's like,
good job, Matt.
Thank you.
Sorry,
thank you.
Yes, thank you. And that's just the first. So we're gonna move on to the next wine. The next wine that Ron had given Matt to choose was the Malbec Argentina 2015.
Yes, that's wine that should be in everybody's glass. Does everybody have it? Okay, good.
And this is really great with spicy foods. If you love Indian food like I do, good with Indian. But Chef Matt and Danny decided to pair it tonight with smoked duck, smoked cherry jus, and a little southern Chicago's hottest country grits.
That's right.
So tell us, Chef Matt, take it over.
Okay, so yes, we did do smoked duck, but I didn't want to go super smoky with this one. I wanted it to kind of be there in the background. I thought that played best with the wine. I thought anything that was too upfront and smoky would kind of clash a little bit. So in order to do this duck, what we actually did is, first of all, we're doing just duck breast. But what we did is we only smoked it for about an hour. That was it. And the whole idea was to just get the outside of it. And when we're smoking at about 250 degrees or so. It kind of changes depending on what you're smoking, but about 250 degrees. And so like I said, just about an hour just to start to get it on the outside there. And then what we're going to do is to finish it up, we're going to sear it because duck is best when it's got crispy skin, right? So one of the ways that we make sure that we get crispy skin is, one, to have it really super dry. So we smoked this last night, and then I actually left it sitting out on a not out, in a cooler, but uncovered, so that all the moisture got wicked away from it, or evaporated away from it. The other thing that we do, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but we do something like, I can be all Frenchy and say quadrillage. I don't know if you guys can, it's not really coming through there, but you take a knife and you score it, and you do a little grid pattern on it. And the reason you're doing that is because obviously duck is very fatty, just under the skin, which, by the way, these are probably ready to come out, bud. And so this is going to help render out some of that fat. If you didn't have any of those score marks, it wouldn't have anywhere to go, and it would melt, but it would just sit there, and then you take a bite of it, and it's just this big pop of duck fat, which actually sounds kind of good, but yeah, actually, never mind. I'm not doing this again.
Now I'll continue along that line. Right?
What's that?
You take it away.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, earlier we obviously had to do a lot more than just the one duck breast. So in cooking it, doing it seared earlier, I got to render out a whole bunch of duck fat. So I'm actually going to use that to sear this duck. So just a little bit, not a lot. You want to have this about medium-high. It's just barely smoking, which is what you want. And then one little tip I'll give you is, anytime you're dropping something down in your pan, always do it away from you, not towards you. Because especially with something like duck, and you guys will start to hear it, it likes to pop and it likes to sizzle because of all that fat in there. It'll start to, once it starts to come out, it will jump out at you a little bit. So you always want to make sure that it's facing away from you.
So folks who are watching on Facebook Live and our audience here, you are very comfortable with the meals and the dishes that you're preparing. Is there a meal or a particular food that you absolutely hated as a child and now you cannot live without it?
Oh, you added that second part.
Well, hey, it's a two-parter then. What food do you still hate? And then one where your parents said, I told you so.
Okay, so, the one that I used to hate, but I absolutely love now, is Brussels sprouts.
Yes.
Absolutely, 100%
yes.
used to hate
Give some
them.
applause for Brussels sprouts.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That guy's working overtime.
A little butter. You put those in the pan.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
No,
okay.
I used to absolutely hate them, but I love them now. And then the thing that I just still can't stand is salmon. I can't stand it.
Really?
Yeah, I can't stand it. And it's one of those things, like, I think a lot of people,
even if you're on the coast and you saw the guy catch it on the boat.
Well, okay, how about, there's some mainstream salmon that I don't like.
Sure.
But I can trace it back. Most people, they don't know why they don't like something. I can trace it back really easily.
And what is that story?
When I was 6 years old, my grandparents were having a little dinner party at their house, a little reception kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they had a little tray that had cheeses and meats and things like that. And I thought I was taking a big old handful of ham.
Oh.
I was taking a big old handful of smoked salmon, and it was like one of those things where it's not that it tasted bad, but it's kind of like if you're not watching while you're eating breakfast and you grab the orange juice instead of the milk.
Uh-huh.
It's not that the orange juice tastes bad, it's just not what you were expecting.
Right.
Yeah, that's how that was for me.
And that stuck with you for life.
Well, my hands smelled like it for the rest of the day, and I just couldn't get over it. So yeah, I can trace that one back. But all right, so a little bit more about what I'm doing here. So while this is searing, and we like to do this kind of low and slow because it'll take a little while to render out.
That's for you.
Yes.
Why don't we take a pause now, Ron? Why don't you talk to us about the sniffing of the wine and taking a taste of it before we have the food, and the swirling. Can you talk again? Is this legs, right?
They call it legs. It's from the glycerin in the wine. If you want to get technical, and just because it has a lot of legs doesn't mean that the wine's good, bad, or indifferent. But it usually could tell you the viscosity level of the wine. Is it rich and heavier, or is it a little bit lighter?
Okay.
This wine is Malbec is generally a little bit bigger wine. This particular Malbec is not as big and bold, as intense as some others. It's a little more approachable, accessible. It's got a lot of really good character in it, a lot of good cherry in the nose.
Malbec is my favorite varietal of all wines.
It's a good thing we brought it for tonight.
I know. It's. I feel like it's a very rich flavor in the back of your mouth. It makes you feel very full, and as you said earlier, when we're talking, makes your body feel warmer.
It's got this richness to it and this really nice spicy character to it. And this particular one, some of them can have a lot of alcohol bite in it. This one doesn't have that. This one kind of, gets you, the warmth gets you, but you can taste this wine to me and it's all of a sudden like, I'm ready for the food because I just know something's going to enhance the wine even more. And this is one of those wines that it's a cooking wine. How much of it can you drink while you're cooking?
Absolutely.
So,
I'm almost through this glass, so.
And we'll get you more then. We'll get you more. So, but that's one of the things that I like about this wine and I like about Malbec is that it's got a lot of intensity. If you like Cabernet, but you want something a little bit different, it's not as hot, and yet it's very, very approachable, easy to drink to me, and it just goes down really, really delightfully.
Remember, you can find all the wines that we're drinking tonight at your neighborhood Julasco. You can find them online, theseekerwines.com. Matt.
All right.
What are you stirring?
So what I've got going over here is, with this dish, I guess I never recapped what we were doing, but we're doing you did for me though.
Yes.
The grits. So I'm building the grits over here. So started off with a little bit of oil and a little bit of butter down in a hot pan. And the reason why I do a little bit of oil and not just butter is that butter has a tendency to scorch if you cook it for too long or too high. When you cut it with some oil, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. It won't burn quite as quick. So because then to that I added garlic and I added some diced onions. And what I wanted to do is sweat those down. So I wanted to have a little bit more flexibility with how long it would take for the butter to start to brown because I'm going to cook these for a little bit. But so then on top of that, what we're going to add is going to be the white grits. And this is basically from white corn. The one that we're using is kind of about a medium grind on it. You can get really super coarse or you can get really fine. Like if you start talking about polenta, that's usually a lot finer. And the difference between polenta and grits is nothing. It's where they're from. It's all the same thing, okay? Matter of fact, one of the restaurants I had suggested I was going to do grits, and they said, well, can we call it polenta so it just sounds a little bit more higher end? And I was like, sure, we can call it whatever you would like.
It's true, though. There is sometimes a stigma where you say grits.
Yeah.
You have this southern mentality where it's not as refined, and there are so many amazing meals that have grits.
It's true. And you know what? I mean, like, grits are great because it can be a vehicle. Like, you can impart any flavors you want into this. For this one, we're going to be doing mascarpone with it. So something rich and creamy.
The crowd just went, oh.
But you can also do, at one of our restaurants, we're doing a buttermilk one as well with scallops. You can do, vegetable stock. You can do chicken stock. You could, with this one, oh yeah, we're getting close there. With this one, I'm just going to do milk. You can do cream. You can add a little bit of cheese to it as well.
Mm-hmm. So speaking about adding all these ingredients and the flavors and the textures, is there a meal or a dish that you've always wanted to try, but you're just a little afraid of? You're not sure if you could do it right, and you're like, I'm just not sure.
As a cook?
Absolutely, as a chef.
I really love sushi. I love the
right?
I love the idea of super fresh fish.
Actually, let's do that again. Hold on. Sushi, yes. Come on, thank you. Hey, come on.
I feel confident that I could make something that tastes okay, but it's the detail that the truly greats put into it. Like how they source their fish and then how they treat it. Most of them, they don't actually. The best in the world, they don't even serve it the day they get it. They actually let it sit for a few days. Yeah, and let some of the rigor come off of it. But learning those techniques, making great sushi rice, like I would love to do that. You got to put in a lot of sweat into that one.
One of my Saturday shopping indulgences with the kids is that I know it's not every Julasco, but our local Julasco makes fresh sushi. They have a fresh sushi bar. And going to see what they've made, whether it's a spicy tuna or a salmon or a California roll, it's amazing. And for me, not only the taste, but the artistry of the sushi as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So with the grits here, just added some milk to it, and then we're going to let this come back up to a boil. Now, these grits will cook fairly fast. You can do really slow cook grits where you turn it really low heat and then you very gradually add a little bit, let it cook down, add a little bit more, let it cook down. For this one though, I would just want to get it up there and get it going. But as soon as this comes to a boil, it'll start to thicken up a little bit. And then at that time, we'll add a little bit of our mascarpone to it. But you can see here with the duck, you know, I wanted to, because we smoked it, it did cook a little bit through, but you can see the color that we were looking for, and it's got a nice crisp skin to it. And then you'll see when we open it up that it's going to be nice and pink on the inside. So what I like to do too is, especially with the smoking it, I didn't actually season the outside of it because I actually brined it a little beforehand. I forgot to mention that, but I brined the duck before we smoked it, which is just a water, salt, and sugar mixture. Very simple on this one. But what I'm going to do is after I slice it, I'm going to actually season it on the inside. If you guys are wondering why I didn't season it before I put it down. But all right, so we got our grits coming up here. I'm going to add a little bit of black pepper to it.
What's your favorite spice to use in a recipe that makes anything, the majority of what you're making, better, that we could use at home?
So my favorite one that I've been using a lot lately is actually smoked paprika.
Really?
Paprika is one of those things that, like, people forget about it, you know? They think of it as just like that last little garnish that goes over top your deviled egg or something like that, you know? And certainly,
we love our deviled eggs.
It is good for that.
Right?
I think that paprika is the parsley of the spice world. You know, parsley gets no love because it just sits on the side of the plate and, you know, gets flicked off and all that. So, but paprika actually has a lot of great flavor to it, and you can get some really great producers of paprika that, you know, like if it's really well smoked, really nicely smoked, it brings out this wonderful, well, obviously smoky, but kind of nutty and full flavor to the dish that you're doing. So I've been really into that lately.
I've been on a crushed red pepper flakes.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this morning I made an egg white omelet with peppers and onions chopped, but then I feel like the crushed red pepper flakes on top always give it a little more heat and spice. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, did you know that with red pepper flakes, the longer you cook them, if you apply heat to them, the hotter they get?
I've never tried to cook them before. Wow.
Yeah, so like if you're doing, so that's one thing, obviously we're not doing pastas or anything here, but let's just say that we were.
Right.
And you wanted to add in a little bit of heat to it, you can actually control how hot it gets by when you add it in. If you put it in really early on, like
while
if I
you're
was
cooking the pasta.
Yeah, let's just say I'm doing let's switch back over to what we're actually doing, which is barbecue. Right. If in here I wanted to give this a little heat, I might just in the last 2 minutes of cooking, I might add a little bit of the crushed red peppers because it's just going to release a little bit of the oil. If I want it to be super spicy, I would add the exact same amount, but I would do it right at the beginning.
Wow.
So.
Good tips. See, we're learning something new every day. I love it. Thank you, Matt.
All right, so we've got this nice and creamy, and then we're going to add in the mascarpone. Now, mascarpone is basically, it's like it's very creamy. It's very buttery, and it's really, for this, it's going to give it a great, smooth, creamy mouthfeel. Little bit of richness to it, obviously. You know, if you don't have mascarpone, you can use cream cheese if you'd like, or something along those lines. But I have access to mascarpone, so I'm going to use it.
That was Chef Matt bragging about the ingredients that he has access to because he's cooking in here versus our kitchen at home.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And Danny is getting everything plated while...
All right, awesome.
Cool.
Matt we timed that one perfectly, Danny.
It looks amazing.
All right.
Amazing.
So, for our
plating...
Can I
help you? Want me to take something?
Can you just take that for me?
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, so for this one, what we're going to do is I'm just going to drop down kind of a line right down the middle of these grits. And you notice, well, I guess my last one was a little bit fussy, but for the most part, I don't get too worried about where things fall on the plate, you know. If it kind of falls off the side, it falls off the side. If it stays up, it stays up. So, all right, so cutting through here. Now, it's important too. You guys know the concept of letting the meat rest before you cut into it. You guys familiar with that?
No, tell us.
So the idea is that when you're cooking meats or cooking anything really, especially protein based, you are tightening up all the proteins in it, okay? And so what you want to do is you want to let the proteins relax a little bit before you cut into it. Otherwise, all the juices are going to run out of it.
So once you take it out of the pan, you want to let it
Exactly. You want to let it
for a
sit.
little bit? Okay.
The larger the piece of meat, the longer you want to let it rest. So, okay, so we got our duck there. And then over here, I didn't really talk about this much, but this is the smoked cherry jus. So what I did is I took dehydrated tart cherries and then just let them rehydrate in cherry juice. And then I took those after they were hydrated and I put them into our smoker for about 2 hours, okay? And then on top of that, we built a duck stock and reduced it really far down so that it got this really wonderful texture to it and this almost syrup-like consistency.
There's a lot of whispering going on. Is anyone else, their mouth is watering as much as mine when you're talking about this and seeing this? This is incredible.
Danny, can I get some of those greens from you? Thank you. Okay, so then the last thing that I'm going to put on top of here is just going to be a little bit, these are mustard greens, baby mustard greens. So they're going to add just a little bit of zip to it, a little bit of like almost a horseradish, peppery flavor to it. Okay, but it should be relatively subtle. So that is our smoked duck with the mascarpone grits and smoked cherry jus.
So everyone in the audience is getting a plate to try it with. With the Malbec run that we're going to try with this dish, I got to cheat. I got to see the notes before, but knowing that and then having a sip of it, there is a hint of vanilla in the Malbec.
Right, and the vanilla comes usually from the oak barrel
Okay.
that the wine is aged
okay,
in, because the staves will bring out that vanilla character in the barrel. So that's where you can get that slight hint of it in there. It's very subtle, as you said, but it's really interesting when you try to dive in and find the character in there.
So take a bite of the duck with the cherry and the grits, and then have the wine with that. And
I'm just waiting. I think you're going to find the cherry in the wine explodes when you taste this duck with the cherry jus on it.
Definitely.
So we've cooked 2 of the 3 dishes so far that Matt has prepared for us, and I'm always interested to talk to chefs because you get to make the most amazing things and be creative and textures and flavors. But for us, we're getting ready for Bears and Packers tonight, so we want to know it's a Sunday morning, you're not working at the restaurant, you're at home. What is your guilty food pleasure where you say, I'm either going to cook my favorite dish or I'm just going to eat my favorite dish? What is that for you?
I may not have a career after I admit this out loud. My favorite thing on the planet to eat, guilty pleasure-wise anyway, is hot dogs with squeezed cheese.
Yes! Is that like the Cheese Whiz, the squeezable cheese?
It is yeah.
Do you sometimes, wait. Do you sometimes just not have the hot dogs and just put the cheese right into your mouth out of the bottle?
The leaning tower.
Yes.
No, and
we are in Chicago, for goodness sake. I mean, it's a Chicago dog.
I know, and I do have to justify it just a little bit, which is that, like I said earlier about family and growing up with food and like the comfort of it.
Yes.
That has such comforting memories for me because it was what my grandmother used to make for me when I would come and visit. So it's kind of one of those things when you needed an escape from a long day or something like that. Hot dog with squeezed cheese.
I love it. What about you, Ron?
Oh gosh, that's a good one.
Everyone has their one guilty pleasure food where you don't want to admit it, but you will, and you love it, and someone puts a plate of it in front of you, and it's like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, I'm like a sucker to go to like Chinese food with as many different things as I can have. That was when I was a kid. My family, we would go out and we'd go to Chinatown and they'd order 15 different things and we'd all get to keep trying a little bit of everything.
I love it.
That was always what I loved to do.
What do you guys think about the duck paired with the Malbec? Good?
Good.
How do you like how this Malbec changed with the duck and the sauce in there?
All right, so go ahead.
No, I was going to say, did you really notice the difference in it? Because I certainly did. That cherry, what I was hoping just really kind of exploded and was just right on.
It's good.
So you're going to finish up with this, and we want to move on to our third wine and our third dish because we've been having so much fun cooking that we want to eat more, right, Matt?
I know. I feel like I wanted this to last longer.
It is. We're having fun. So the third wine,
really
slowly. So the third wine that Ron gave Matt to choose from of what you were going to create was the Cab from Chile from
Correct,
2014.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll be bringing that out right now for you. The Seeker Cabernet from the Central Valley in Chile, and it's very, very reminiscent of the great flavors and things that you want to find in a Cabernet. It's got really nice fruit, good structure, a really nice tannin structure. So there's a really strong, what we call a backbone to the wine that allows it to hold up to strong flavors with it. And it's got a really nice finish of strong fruit, but it lingers nicely. And I love Cabernets that linger because I love drinking Cabernets, and one of the things I like is that 30 seconds later, I'm still tasting it.
Yes, and one of the things that this Seeker Cab goes really well with, especially we're talking about tailgating for football and things, is grilled vegetables.
It goes great with grilled vegetables because sometimes in Cabernet you'll find hints of green vegetable in it. Some of them, it's where the growing region might be slightly cooler. You'll get a little bit of bell peppery or green veggie character to it.
Okay.
And when you, by itself, I find that's probably my least favorite wine to drink is maybe Cabernet from California's Central Coast where it's too cold. By itself, I cannot handle the bell pepper character in it. But when you pair it with grilled vegetables,
like
it
grilled
cuts
broccoli
out, it cuts out part of that character that I don't care for, and it all of a sudden brings up a brightness to the wine that wasn't there for me before.
Awesome. So our audience, for everyone watching on Facebook Live, again, these are Seeker wines. You can find them at your neighborhood Jewel-Osco, online at theseekerwines.com. We're here cooking with Chef Matt and Chef Danny from Smoke Daddy downtown on Division, thesmokedaddy.com. So you are pairing the Cab tonight with smoked brisket.
That's
and
right.
ridiculously gourmet mac and cheese. Oh my gosh, right? Right. And Matt told me a secret, and he's like, well, one of the cheeses that was in this was so pricey that I shouldn't tell you the price. So I'm not going to tell you, but for our audience here, it's going to be just delicious. So take it away. Tell us.
So I figured that, obviously our first two dishes were not exactly straight up barbecue that you think of. So I figured I would end on something that everybody would identify as barbecue. And so we're going to do... yes, smoked brisket, and then this the mac and cheese that we're gonna do. I wanted to do obviously a mac and cheese side because it's
Cab.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's one of our signature things over at Smoke Daddy, but I wanted to make it work with this wine, and one of the things that I think went really well with this is actually some really bold cheeses with a little bit of age on them. So the mac and cheese that we're gonna do has 5 different cheeses in it. It's going to start off with a base of cream cheese, but then we're going to have Gruyere. We're going to have a 5-month Gouda, 18-month Gouda, a cloth-bound cheddar, and then Fontina. Okay, so so to start off with this, we're going to start with a little bit of, I'll get my oil in here again, and then a little bit of butter. Because just like everything else we've done tonight, we're going to start off with a little bit of oil, a little bit of onion, and garlic. Oh, I got that too hot.
So all the meals that you made for us tonight have been amazing and tasty and texture, but we already got a confession out of you about the Chicago dog.
Yes.
So give us an example or a story recently where you wanted to try something and despite your best effort, it just turned out awful.
So I've been really wanting to get into more of like old rustic style of food and preparation. So things like pickling and canning and artisan bread making and things like that. My wife and I just bought a house. We were looking for it over the last year, and I kept telling her the one thing that absolutely had to be there was an aging room. Some room off on the side that I could put my meats that I was curing and my sausages.
She's like, honey, I want a pantry, and you're like, I want an aging room.
And I didn't get it, but that's all right.
You could build it in the basement,
I
right?
know, right?
Something?
No, and so I gave doing breads in particular a shot a little while ago. Oh, man. The people that can do that right are incredibly impressive. I mean, that's a hard gig. But I gave it a shot. I'll come back to it someday.
Come back to it, right.
Yeah, yeah.
First, you need to make your aging room.
Exactly. Priorities. Okay, so we've got our onions and garlic down in here. We're just going to let them sweat. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. You know, one of the things about seasoning, too, I haven't mentioned yet, you want to season all the way throughout the process. I think a lot of times most people think like just at the end we'll do that last little finishing salt over top. But if you season all the way through and in the right amounts, like you don't want to do the whole bit of salt and then the whole thing of salt and whatever, but you're allowing it to dissolve and seep into the different layers of flavor, and that's really important. If you do it right at the end, you're getting that very high note salinity, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of, it's the first thing that hits you, but it's not really all the way through it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I always try to season at pretty much every main stage of the cooking process. So, all right, so we've got these going, and then we're going to add just a little bit of flour to this, because what we're doing is we're building a roux. And a roux is basically, I mean, the very common one, the typical one, is flour suspended in fat. Okay, and the really popular one is flour suspended in butter. But realistically, you know, I could have taken that duck fat and I could make one. You could take just vegetable oil. You could take shortening. You could take bacon fat, whatever you'd like to. But the reason we make a roux is because if we were to just, you know, obviously the flour acts as a thickener. But if we were to add it just straight away without any fat, you would get clumping. You would get these dry pockets. But by adding it and mixing it in with the fat, you're getting separation between your starch granules. And so then when you add in the liquid, then it can, it doesn't have that clumping action. Because the reason it clumps is because you'll get the outside bit of the pocket of starch. That all starts to absorb your liquid, and it forms a shell around it. So no more liquid can get in. So if you don't have big clumps, then you don't have, well, big clumps. What was I looking for?
Hashtag big clumps.
Hashtag big clumps. My clumps.
Hashtag smoke daddy.
All right, so then to this, we're going to add in some milk. Now, I'm not going to add in all of my milk all at once because I want to make sure that, again, I get all of this well incorporated. If I were to go ahead and add in everything all at once, all the milk at once, first, it would cool everything down way too much, and you don't want to do that. And two, it would be very difficult to get the roux mixed in. You would then end up with clumps of roux, and it would take a lot longer. You would eventually be able to get it to be uniform, but it would take a heck of a lot longer. So.
And what temperature are you cooking this at?
This is
medium?
This is about medium. I'm going to make sure that I'm watching this pretty closely because the steps coming up here, you actually don't want it to be too hot. If you, when we're adding in our cheese, if it's too hot, you'll actually cause it to seize up and it'll squeeze out all of the oils in the cheese, and then you'll end up with that gritty texture. If you guys have ever tried to make like a, we're talking about football, like a cheese dip or something like that, and it's all gritty and grainy, so you end up going with the processed cheese instead because that's foolproof. It's because you cooked it a little bit too high of temperature. So. All right, so I'm going to let this just come up to a simmer. It'll start to thicken up as it does that. And then give this just another second.
Does anyone have, while he's waiting for this, does anyone have a question for Chef Matt? Everyone is entranced and already they've got their wine and they got their smoked barbecue on. They're in a little bit of a lull.
I think we need one more glass of wine, and then the
maybe.
Questions will just start coming out.
Right? No questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you pick those cheeses for certain reasons, or just randomly?
The question was from the audience, did you pick the cheeses for certain reasons?
Yeah, I did actually. I wanted to, just because it's expensive, nice cheese or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make a great mac and cheese. It can be too intense in flavor. So what I tried to do is I tried to vary the cheeses so that we had some that were impactful. One of the great things about the Gouda that we're doing, the 18-month Gouda, is that it has a lot of nuttiness to it, a little bit of like caramely, salty flavors, but it's also a very strong flavor. So then matching that up with something like the Fontina that's a lot more mild, our cheddar that we're doing with the cloth bond cheddar, is not a real bold flavor. So you're just looking for that balance. And if you remember, I said that we did a 5-month Gouda and an 18-month Gouda, and that's because I love the characteristics of the Gouda, and I'd like kind of having, you can almost taste it developing through the dish, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so this is up to a simmer now. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in just a little bit of cream cheese. I know it sounds weird that like we have all these awesome cheeses and then I'm adding in cream cheese, but this again is going to help to kind of serve as like the base of this whole thing. You know what? I'm going to switch from this to a whisk. But it's going to act as a nice creamy base. So obviously we thickened up the milk, so that's going to bring some creaminess to it, but there's just something that's really nice and rich about the cream cheese that we just don't get from those other cheeses necessarily outside of, say, the Fontina.
What's your favorite kitchen utensil that you can't ever have enough of?
Oh, man, my knife. My
Really?
knife. Yeah, my knife.
Because you seemed really excited when you finally got to use that whisk.
There's something to be
I
said.
did. I noticed it. He's like, I got my whisk now, and here we go. This is really where things are starting to happen.
There is something to be said for a really good whisk, but you know, chefs. I mean, we have a knife in our hand 90% of the time. And
What's
so,
your favorite knife? 'Cause, I mean, for us regular folks, my wife has a block of knives on the counter, and she yells at me when I use the wrong type of knife. And for me, I'm just like, it's a knife that's sharp, whether I'm cutting an apple or a tomato or an onion, that's it. But for you,
Sure.
You know, what do you really love? What's your favorite knife?
You know, everybody kind of has their own thing that they really like. I've gotten so used to my chef's knife, and this is the knife that I use, and it's a little dirty right now, but it's a it's German steel, but kind of a German-Japanese shape.
Valerian steel?
Yes, exactly.
That's a Game of Thrones reference for everyone who doesn't watch Game of Thrones.
That doesn't take out the White Walkers, does it?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Okay.
But no, it's the steel. It just is a good mixture of strength and flexibility.
Okay.
So it'll hold an edge for a long time, which is something obviously that's pretty important because. You know, if your edge is too hard, then it'll chip, or it's too difficult to get the edge back. This one I just have found, like, I love the shape of it. I love the way it fits my hand. I love the balance, and it's easy to sharpen as well. So, okay, so I've got the cream cheese incorporated here. The next thing that I'm going to add in is our shredded cheese, and I shredded this really super fine. Actually, I'm taking credit where I shouldn't. Danny shredded this really super fine.
Come over here. Follow the camera over here. So while we've been watching Matt, we've been talking over here. Danny has just been doing all the amazing work. He's plating out all the food. He's got a bunch of people back here, helping him, and he's like, I'm fine, I'm good. So yes, thank you to Danny. Danny, what's the restaurant that with your sister that Danny comes from? The sister company?
Remington's.
Remington.
Yeah.
So Danny is in charge of the back of the house, which is the entire kitchen at Remington, and he is phenomenal, as you can see. So yes,
yeah.
he's
And
been helping
Danny,
out.
I'm just
so
gonna
he shredded all this fine.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just gush about Danny real fast because he deserves it. But Danny started with us as a line cook when we first opened, and had some experience, but was kind of new to the whole thing. And within just a year, it was very clear that he was going to be somebody very important to our company. And so you've been a sous chef with us now for a little over a year. Yeah, a little more than a year. So yeah, definitely, Danny, hands up, applause.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to take all of Danny's hard work and I'm going to melt it all down. But you'll notice that I took this away from the heat, okay? And the reason why I did that is, back to what I was saying. If it gets too hot, it'll seize up, it'll get really tight, and then it'll get grainy. And so this is where you kind of start playing a little bit of a game. You want to add just enough so that you can get it all to melt down, but not so much that you cause it to cool down too much and seize up. And
so
you want to kind of...
We're watching on a Facebook Live. The camera's there where you put it back on the heat.
Yeah, you want to...
This blending of it is amazing because the texture, when you were adding a little bit... Matt doesn't know when the camera's moving, so he's just waiting.
Yeah.
But if you see the texture of it, it's very fine. And then as he keeps whisking it in, it blends in very quickly.
Yeah, it does. That's one of the reasons why it was so important to get this really fine. I mean, you certainly could run these cheeses through, a shredder. You got like the little block thing that you can do it with. But what we like to do it with is a microplane, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with or not. But microplane is it's a zester that actually looks a lot like a wood plane. Takes off just a very small amount of, say, lemon zest or lime zest, but it's also great for doing things like this, where you want really fine texture. Danny, I think I had you grind up too much.
There is never such a thing as too much cheese.
All right, I'll add more then.
There you go.
All right.
Long day at work while you're finishing that up and you're blending that together. Long day at work, you come home. What's your favorite meal to make? I'm exhausted. I'm finally at home in my happy place. You just bought a new house with your wife.
Yeah.
What are you making?
Hot dogs with squeezed cheese. No. No, I would say probably, my wife and I at home, we love to cook Mexican food.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that we absolutely love is making shrimp tacos.
Oh, yeah.
With a tomatillo, like salsa verde dressing for it and all, and I make a avocado lime
crema. So you
crema.
hate salmon, but you love shrimp.
Yeah, it's just that salmon. I don't know what it is, but anyway, so
fresh shrimp.
When we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we can.
I was going to say, do you have a trick or a preference or a tip?
Just with shrimp in general? Cook them less than you think you need to.
Okay.
Most people overcook shrimp. And so that's where you end up getting that really rubbery texture to it. You want your shrimp to not be, rubbery.
Yes.
But you don't want them to be, what am I trying to say? Not opaque, but they look a little see-through almost, But you also don't want them to be like bright white. If they're bright white and they're leaking out juices while they're sitting there, then you've cooked them too hard. So I find that most people cook it. I tell my wife to take it off about a minute earlier than she thinks she needs to take it off. So, okay, so we've got our macaroni mixed in there, and then what we're going to do for this one is I'm going to spoon it into a little cast iron vessel here.
The coloring is great on that.
Yeah, definitely is. And then we're going to top it off with a little bit. Oh, you know what? There's 6 cheeses. This is Havarti. So a little bit of Havarti over top.
Everyone is really angry that you added another cheese.
Yeah, right? All right, so we drop those down, and then where did I put it?
Your wine is right there.
No, not that one this time, but this is right over here. This is our finished product after it's baked for a little bit. So it'll still be nice and creamy, but it is going to absorb a little bit more, and that's okay. I wanted to absorb some of
Look at that picture. It's beautiful.
Yeah? All right, I like it. So I wanted to absorb a little bit more moisture into the pasta because then you're going to get those flavors all throughout it. It's not just on the surface. So the last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to slice up our brisket. It's hot. And now for our brisket, if you guys want to, we can probably start passing that out.
I was going to say,
Do we want to talk about the wine with it at all?
Oh, we can certainly flip.
Yeah, why don't we start to
Can
pass out?
Or should I
I'm in
finish
the
up
way.
my description on the brisket?
Go finish the description
Okay.
on the brisket, then they'll get it out, and then we'll talk about the wine.
All right. So our brisket, this is of all the things that we smoke this the longest, and that's because it's the biggest piece of meat. It has the most connective tissue in it. Actually, the thing that we smoke the absolute longest is part of the brisket that we actually trim off after the first 8 hours of smoking, and that's called the burnt ends. And so with that, I'm sorry I didn't bring any, but with that we smoke the brisket for 8 hours, and then we follow that up with about another 4 to 6 hours on the burnt ends. But when we're doing our smoking, we are rubbing and basically doing a dry marinade with what we call our Mojo rub, which is just a blend of some sugar, chili, herbs, all sorts of different things.
really
Letting
good,
that
too.
sit overnight, and then, like I said, we smoke for about 8 hours. And when we smoke, we're smoking with the it's typically hickory, but we'll also do fruit woods like apple and cherry. So, all right. And then to plate this one up, I'm just going to go ahead and no muss, no fuss. Just go ahead and go down. A little bit of breadcrumbs over top. And then we're good to go. All right.
Lovely. Thank you. So everyone in our audience, hopefully now, is getting a plate with the brisket and the mac and cheese, and now you have a chance to blend it with the cab.
We have to try it first.
And two, one of the things that I should have mentioned is that we do this dry. We don't do the barbecue sauce on it. And in particular for this, I didn't want to have the barbecue sauce really conflicting and fighting against the wine, because there's a lot of high herbs and spices in there that would I think would fight with it a little bit. So
I think you're right. Now, after tasting it and then tasting the wine, where I thought the wine had a lot of really enjoyable, easy drinking fruit when I first had it by itself, now after having it with the brisket and the smokiness, all this smokiness is coming out of the wine. And the wine's much bigger now, bolder, a little more intense, and the tannins are dancing differently.
Wow. I taste a little chocolate, right?
You could get that in Cabernet. You can get a little bit of chocolate. Sometimes the smokiness will come out of here and get that. That's very possible. So it really enhances it, and the wine becomes smokier and fruitier at the same time with the brisket. Did you find the same thing?
I did actually, yeah, it's delicious.
Do you guys like how this paired up?
Yeah.
So, I've been doing wine and food pairing dinners and events for almost 30 years, and one of the things that's always interesting is a lot of times you'll get a menu from a chef saying, here's what the food's going to be, you have to pair the wine to it. But I've always thought it was fun to take the wine first and let the chef be creative with, this is what we're going to do, and then there's no limit to it.
Yeah.
If you give me if you say this is what I'm making, I'm limited to what we can pick for the wine to pair with it. And one of the things that I think you probably could have served the Malbec with this,
Sure,
and
yeah.
the Cabernet with the duck, and it probably would have been really terrific.
Yeah, because I love the duck with the Cabernet, but I like the cherries with the Malbec.
Right.
But then vice versa too. So it was it was kind of a toss up. I'll be honest.
And that's one of the things that you can always at home. If you like to drink red wine, drink red wine. Sometimes it doesn't have to pair exactly, but sometimes just trying different things and seeing what works for you and what you like, and whether you're trying a wine like the Seeker, which is a very affordable wine in the $11, $12 a bottle range, or you're drinking a $25 or $30 bottle of wine, just find things that you like, and then if you get the right kind of food with them, it just enhances it even more. But there's no rules. There's nothing wrong. There's a way
Well,
to
the
do
only
certain
rule
things.
is if we're going to have a glass of Malbec or Cab, we need to have some 6 cheese mac and
Yes.
cheese.
Okay. Yes. That's okay. That rule.
I mean,
is
we've been
steadfast.
spoiled now, so we
Yes.
just have regular mac and cheese. Like, oh my god, this is not the 6 cheese with the
Right.
18-month Gouda and the 5-month Gouda, and you spoiled us.
Yes.
You spoiled us.
Well, then good. I've done I've
Yes.
done my job. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for our chef and our wine pairings? Anyone? I know you're all kind of eating again. This is so good. We've been watching you make this at all. Yes, we got a microphone for you.
Chef, exactly what brand is that knife? I'm a culinary student, so I'm always looking for like a good new knife and different things to use.
Of my chef's knife, it's a Mac knife.
Mac.
Yeah, it's Mac. I used to, well, I won't say what other company I used to use, but I've used a bunch of different kinds, and this one has just always, I like the weight of it. I like the balance to it. As a matter of fact, my sister-in-law is a chef out in LA, and I bought her that knife, and then I bought this knife for one of our chefs in our company too, because I just got to spread the word on it. Yeah.
Question for the audience. What were you most surprised about tonight? Did you have an impression of coming in thinking you were going to do a food and wine pairing tasting and something that you didn't expect happened? Anyone with the wine flavors or with the food? They're all like, that's good. So just a reminder, the Seeker wines is what we've been tasting. We had the Riesling, we had the Malbec from Argentina, yes. And the Cab from Chile. All available at your neighborhood Julasco. You can find out more there of all the varietals at theseekerwines.com. And then Chef Danny and Chef Matt from the SmokeDaddy.com, Smoke Daddy downtown on Division Street. Thank you so much for coming in and cooking.
Absolutely.
It's been amazing. We love it. We love it. Yes. And remember, truly, for Chef Danny, this meal would not have been possible if he had not shredded the cheese at the end. So really, he is the savior of our meal.
That's correct.
Yes. So, and you can, all the photos and the videos are online at culinarykitchenchicago.com with CBS Radio and US 99 and hashtag Chicago Kitchen. We just thank you for coming in. We're going to do many more of these. And we love you for listening and for eating and drinking and sharing this experience with us. So thanks for watching online.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.